Achieving independence in 1776, America set up what is now the longest-standing constitutional democracy in 1789, one that resembled the British trilateral system of legislative, executive, and judicial branches. The legislative branch makes the laws. The executive branch carries out the laws, and the judicial branch evaluates the laws. The journey wasn't always an easy one. In fact, the first year of independence brought about a 46% drop in GDP for the original 13 states, and it took 15 years to get back to the same economic size as they had achieved under the British Empire. America has achieved many great leaps through wars, civil rights, infrastructure, and more. Here is the story of our first 45 presidents and why they are remembered. Washington was the founding president and setter of many precedents. He was the only president to get 100% of the Electoral College vote and not to live in the White House, as the executive branch was held in New York and Philadelphia. Adams was most proud of the peace he forged with France. Jefferson was able to double the size of the United States with the Louisiana Purchase from France. Madison presided over the War of 1812 against the British and helped establish the United States as a rising power. The Monroe Doctrine declares that the United States would intervene with any European power that tried to colonize land in the Americas. These, amongst others, established a long-standing foreign policy for the United States. Adams helped develop the growing nation through mass infrastructure projects, developing canals, roads, and bridges throughout the country. Jackson ushered modern-day politics and the two-party system as he formed the Democratic Party. Van Buren was the first president born as a U.S. citizen, but, as his name implies, he grew up speaking Dutch. He went from rags to riches and was a self-made man. Harrison left little of a legacy after dying 30 days after his inauguration. Tyler set the precedent that the vice president takes over for a fallen president and set the scene to annex Texas. Polk established the U.S. Naval Academy and the Smithsonian, and the first postage stamps were issued. Taylor helped set the stage for abolition despite being a slaveholder, and he was able to use this position to bring California into the United States. Fillmore's foreign policy helped resolve many brewing global conflicts, which led the United States towards expansion of trade in the Far East. Pierce was not popular and spurred growing disagreements, which in turn led him to become the first president to hire a full-time bodyguard. Buchanan presided over the beginning of the Civil War. Lincoln abolished slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation and also signed into effect the first income tax, which was charged on a citizenship basis instead of a residency basis. This is still an issue to this day for many American expats. Johnson was the first president to be impeached and was only acquitted by one vote on charges of violation of the Tenure of Office Act. Grant readmitted the last of the Confederate States back into the Union and prosecuted the Ku Klux Klan leaders and gave African Americans the right to vote amongst many other rights. Hayes' hotly contested election was more memorable than his time in office. Garfield was assassinated after a short time in office, but the first recorded air conditioner was built to cool his room during this struggle for his life during the summer heat. Arthur brought about many improvements to civil rights for African Americans and Native Americans, especially through education. Cleveland is the first president to have been filmed and was also the only one to be married in the White House and have two terms that were non-concurrent. Harrison brought about the Sherman Antitrust Act, which prevents cartels and monopolies to abolish the robber barons. McKinley continued the expansion westward with the expansion of territories in Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Roosevelt was the youngest president and through his charisma brought much significance back to the office of the presidency. Taft was the only president that later served in the Supreme Court after appointing 6 justices to that same court. Wilson campaigned against joining World War I, but ended up bringing the United States into that war. He also vetoed the Volstead Act, also known as Prohibition, but Congress passed it anyways. Harding was the first president voted in after women gained the right to vote and signed the peace treaty to end World War I. Coolidge continued giving more civil rights to Native Americans and squashing the Ku Klux Klan. His patriotism might have come from being born on the 4th of July. Hoover suffered from the largest Wall Street crash in his first year in office. The rest of his presidency brought about increases to tariffs and nationalism and building large public projects through the Great Depression. Roosevelt was the only president to be elected to more than 2 terms, but brought us out of the Great Depression through multiple new projects and leading the United States into World War II. Truman helped stabilize the economy after World War II, but also presided over the beginning of the Korean and Cold War. Eisenhower ended segregation in schools and the military, and also developed an interstate highway system for the military. Kennedy was the first president to win the Pulitzer Prize and presided over the Vietnam War, Bay of Pigs, Cuban Missile Crisis, and the Civil Rights Movement, and finally his assassination. Johnson ended most of the discrimination in voting with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and nominated the first African American member of the Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall. Nixon is mostly remembered for Watergate and his crimes that led to his resignation. Prior to his resignation, he had the moon landing and established the Environmental Protection Agency. Ford was the only president that was never voted into office or the vice presidency after both President Nixon and Vice President Agnew resigned. The Vietnam War ended under his watch. Carter won the Nobel Prize for his work and is famously known to this day for building houses for the poor through Habitat for Humanities. Reagan was most known for his hard stance on the Cold War, but also established large tax cuts. Bush presided over the end of the Cold War and the first Gulf War. The Americans with Disabilities Act was also in place, which protected the civil rights of citizens living with numerous physical and mental health conditions. He also established the Immigration Act of 1990. Clinton presided over a period of deregulation into the telecommunications and financial industries. In 1999, Clinton signed into law the GLBA. The act repealed the provisions of the Glass-Steagall Act. Bush was president during the 9/11 attacks in New York and D.C., but brought about many deregulation policies that caused an economic crash near the end of his presidency. Obama led the recovery from the financial crisis of 2008, and he established the ACA, which eliminated those with pre-existing conditions from being discriminated against being able to get health insurance. Trump has put into place anti-immigration policies and initiatives to grow the economy, even when they were at the detriment of the environment.